Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. I think we're live. Hi, everybody. I'm 𝗏𝗏𝗴𝗴𝗹𝗏 here at Your Vitality Project. I'm with my dear friend Angela 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, our guest tonight, as ever, as always on Friday night. And as ever, I'm very grateful for your being here. Thank you, Angela.
It's good to be here too, Bob.
Thank you. Thank you. We're working right now with the theme of looking at different emotions and how we can move through those. And it's something that you and I have talked a lot about. You've done a lot of training, have a lot of experience, and I do too. We both care a lot about this. And so our topic tonight is how to create wiggle room around stress. And somebody might indict us for this being redundant. I don't think we can really practice this enough or examine it enough. Plus, whenever you and I come together, I can always account on something being created that's unique in that conversation, for which I'm grateful. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to where we go with this. I've just been working in the last hour on the next few posts for Your Vitality Project, which will center around a specific feeling state, specifically fear. And I'm looking towards the one after that, maybe looking at something that sometimes is more chronic, but it's kind of a different shade, but it's going to be looking at dread. So we're looking at some dark feelings here, and resources for moving through them. So I'd love to invite your reflections in any way, Angela, and let's see where we go in our, half hour or so together here.
Okay.
I'm glad to follow up the conversation.
All right. Well, the title gave me a chuckle, just using the word wiggle or wiggle room, that phrase. I mean, I heard it quite literally, it's a movement, wiggle.
That's great. That's great.
And
I meant it to be slightly humorous, and you got that, and I did not get the nuance of moving, and I'm going to be very interested to have you follow that, because I totally am with you, and I did not once think of that with the title.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to take things pretty literally often. But yeah, that was delightful, and partly because I felt like, well, that's just right in that's my home yard, because I find my portal to presence, my inroad to resting brain and my way of working with stress is usually through movement. And often that will then also come into a place of stillness, or just observing my breath. I like to try to have a range and to combine the more traditional, like sitting meditation. But it's more in my nature to do movement meditation. And so I give myself a bigger room for that. But I continue to try to kind of challenge myself to come to stillness, and to just observe my breath. Because that's something, you bring into many of the posts, many of the exercises, the 5-minute observing the breath. And I love that. I mean, I feel that it's like repeating a resource, and it becomes a resource through repetition.
That's my intention. I hope so.
That's
Thank you for your reinforcing that. Thank you. I feel exactly the same way as you. Yeah.
And let's see, where would I go with this? I guess what strikes me is that before we can work with our stress, we have to be aware. We have to recognize that we're stressed or that we're in red alert brain. And then we have to make a choice. At least this is how it goes for me, because it's kind of in default mode. It's like an automatic thing. It's a reflex.
Yeah.
And maybe there are some people who have a more automatic to just go with the flow with everything, or they're more at ease in life. Maybe they have a certain kind of a patterning in their nervous system that allows for that. But I'm not one of those people. I have the automatic reflex of reacting with stress to a lot of things in life. And so as I've become more aware of that, I realize I have to make a choice. So then that's the next thing. There's the making the choice. And your exercises are often you know, here it is, here's a choice, here's something you can do that can help you shift from red alert brain to resting brain
Yeah.
and deal with stress in a healthy way and build resilience that way. And so, yeah, there's a couple other thoughts that have come up for me around this topic, but I think I'll just pause there and see if
Yeah.
you have anything to add or any other
I'd
ideas.
like you to keep going. I just feel like I'm with you. I want to thank you for your affirming some things that let me just comment on something that came up from as I was listening to you.
Sure.
I remember this is a bit embarrassing, but it's illustrative. I remember when I was first becoming acquainted with meditation, and I remember one year early on, I think I read 50 books on meditation.
Mm.
I kept track of them. That's how I know. And some of it could be justified by the fact I was doing my doctoral dissertation
Mhm.
on meditation. But I remember at the end of the year looking back over that, I'd read countless articles, and I think I read 50 books. I think I was struck by the fact that I'd read a book a week, and almost all of them, I think all of them were on meditation. And I remember thinking to myself, it was kind of a hollow sense of accomplishment,
Mm.
because whatever meditation is, and I even intuited it then early on in the first few years of meditating, I don't think it's about racing through 50 books. I'm embarrassed to say it. It's the
Mm.
truth. I did that. And I guess if I was just doing research on anything and it was my doctoral dissertation, you could justify that. And that's okay for that. But what we're talking about is transforming our lives,
Mm.
including finding skillful ways to manage difficult feeling states. And I know that you know, and I feel certainly 40 years, 35 years later, I certainly know that this is not something, we're not dashing to a finish line. And
Right.
so I've come to appreciate, I do so much in our friendship, Angela, of kind of circling around things and gestating and allowing them to deepen more organically. And that 25 or 30-year-old young man wasn't gestating anything. He was just racing through it. So
Huh.
I just want to comment on that, as I appreciate very much your affirmation of repeated exercises. Tonight, as I was working on the writing around fear, I'll be introducing exercises that we've done before,
Mhm.
just we're applying it now to this specific piece. And when we
Mm.
look next at dread, it reminds me of a line out of a favorite poem by T.S. Eliot. It's in his volume, Four Quartets, and it's out of East Coker. And he says it's like he's speaking to somebody who's listening to him. And he says, "You say I've been repeating something I've said before." And then he says, "I'll say it again." And then he says, "Shall I say it again?" There's something about it that cracks me up every time I
Uh-huh.
read that. But it's the idea. I think he's saying the same thing. I've said this before. I'm going to
Uh-huh.
say it again. Shall I say it again?
Uh-huh.
He's really not even asking for permission.
Yeah.
And something like that. It's like saying it again. You and I have talked about this before also with, my dear friend, Jim Finley, who has said, and I know you and I've talked about this, that everything that is repetitive is not necessarily redundant. Jim
Mhm.
has been at this a long time, and he really means that, like T.S.
Mm.
Eliot means it, or like you mean it, is that to repeat something and to deepen into it would be the opposite of
Yeah.
redundancy, it seems like to me. So
Yeah.
anyway, all of that was welling up as I was listening to you, and I'd
Mm.
love to invite you to continue
Mm.
to circle. If you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, I love that, circling around something and deepening into it.
Mm.
Yeah, I have practices that I do, and I do over and over again. And I think
Yeah.
a key difference for me in between these practices being just repetitive and flat or
Mhm.
um, mechanical
Yeah.
is that, first of all, I enjoy them. I mean, they're pleasurable to me in the sense that I understand that the value and it feels good to my body. But I also bring my awareness to it every single time.
Yeah.
And I look, I observe and I experience it
Mhm.
anew.
Yes.
But there's also this wonderful quality of a
Mm.
part of me relaxes into what is familiar.
Mm.
Like it's familiar. And I really feel that
Mm.
there's something about we have animal bodies. We're animals, but we're also more. And there's something about animals. I've had chickens and I've had other animals in my life, and I know you have. And what strikes me is that they love routine. You know, at least domesticated animals. I can't speak for wild animals, but there's something about knowing that you can count on something. And the nervous system relaxes. It's not a thought thing that I tell myself to relax. It's that I'm doing something that I've done so many times. And then part of me, the animal and the reptile part, calm down. But then the higher self, my higher, you know, my frontal brain, you know, is very engaged, and it's deeper and richer. And I can bring something into it that's richer, like poetry or something. So this is a little off the topic maybe, but just based on what you were saying, I just wanted to bring that up, the richness of having a personal practice.
Really like the way that you're framing it. It reminds me of the conversation that you and I had earlier today in our group with Vitality Project, of really honoring the animal body. And just as I was thinking of your cat as you were speaking, you know, your beloved cat, and of animals I've known, and I was actually imagining a puppy. I long to have a dog in my life again. I grew up with dogs for sure, and it's been challenging for different reasons to have a dog more recently. But I really like your honoring what our animal bodies, our human bodies as animals, what they long for, and that it's a way to it provides a context for all the rest that we're talking about. And it includes, like you said, it provides a context of stability so that we can access what psychology calls our higher cortical functions.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to.
And I actually prefer you're talking about it in terms of poetry. I just think that makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's the value. I was just talking with a friend today after we spoke this morning. I was talking with a friend about the value of rituals. You know, I just he was talking about how it is that he lives a life of almost monastic discipline. And as we were talking, I was aware that I do too, and I suspect that you do too. If by that what we mean is establishing rituals that really feed us and stabilize us. Jim, I mentioned him earlier, Jim Finley, he talks about what would it be like to stabilize or habituate in a spiritual practice. In other words, it's one thing to have a spiritual insight or an epiphany or an aha moment, and those are beautiful and wonderful. But what would it be like to stabilize in that awareness so that it becomes more and more one's habitual state of consciousness? That's very appealing to me, and I think that favors what you're talking about, which is reliability, predictability. You know,
yeah, reliability. That's something that I think I'm enjoying this image. I heard something somewhere as a phrase, and I don't think I've got it memorized just right, but you might be able to relate to this, because we do talk about sort of these three different brain centers, you know, the reptilian, the lizard brain, the mammal, and then the frontal cortex. And I have a visual for that, like the lizard and the bear, or the kitty cat, you know, the mammal part, and then the dancer or the artist. That's how I like to connect with the higher self. And so the phrase though is something like pet the lizard, hug the bear, and talk to, you know, the dancer, or, you know, I'm not sure, but you kind of get the feeling of it. Is it calm the lizard? You can't tell the lizard what to do. You have to calm it somehow. The bear, you know, or I don't know if a bear would want to be hugged, but that energy of just hugging the child, you know, you can't tell the child stop crying and explain why they shouldn't cry, or whatever that emotional being is that needs to be held. But then there's also the higher consciousness that wants to be fed by the poetry, and that's calmed by, playing music or meditating or So
Yeah.
I'm just kind of grasping
Yeah.
around in there
I,
for
li I like that very much. When I was with the image of dancing this morning, I've been working on this poem by 𝗪𝗏𝗴𝗴𝗹𝗲, The Invitation, and she has this section where she says, I want to know if you can be with joy, if you can dance with wildness. I thought of you. If you can dance with wildness and feel the ecstasy to the tips of your fingers and toes, without cautioning us to be careful or realistic, or to remember the limitations of being human. I just love that. It's just beautiful. And so when you shared right now about the dancer as being like maybe a third realm of consciousness, it's almost like the image came to me. I don't know if this is where it goes. Well, I think this is where it goes for you. I don't know where it goes for you in this image. It's almost like release the dancer or release the poet. You know, just like release them.
Yeah.
But it requires taking care, I think, or attending to the lizard and certainly the bear, or the, as you said, the child that needs to be comforted, so that the dancer in you might dance her song, that the poet in you might share her poetry. You know, I just, yeah. I like that. I like what you're working with that very much. I feel like that when you share that, even as it's something in process for you, I think what it does is it invites anybody who has ears to hear tonight, or anybody reviewing this, it invites them to reference their own experiences and maybe find their own words, you know?
Yeah. I've actually enjoyed listening to you dialogue with other people and in other situations as well. When somebody is searching for words and they can't quite find it, but you're in the flow of the conversation. And it's actually in those pauses when they don't have the perfect words immediately, because then I am engaged. You know, I'm not just downloading information, I'm actually participating.
That's good.
And that's another reason I was wondering recently why I enjoy listening to people for whom English is not their first lange. And, you know, so they're also going slower and they're kind of searching, and they might pick a word that doesn't quite fit. But on another level, I feel almost more engaged with where they're going.
That's beautiful, Angela. I really like that. I've never once thought of that before, and I will now. That's really beautiful. It's like, to slow things down and to allow gaps and to allow a place for you to enter in actively as kind of co-translator. You know, it's just great. It's great. I thank you for that. That's wonderful.
Well, that kind of connects with the topic of wiggle room. You know, because it seems like when we're in red alert brain and there's one, you know, one of the characteristics of it is it's just boom, 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 you know, something happens, I'm triggered, I'm reacting, I'm stressed, and there's no room, there's no wiggle room, there's no room for a different perspective or a different interpretation of what's happening. So,
that's good. You make me think of something, and you know this from your own studies too, that my supervisor that 𝗪𝗏𝗴𝗴𝗃, taught me this. She's equal parts therapist and neuroscientist, and she taught me how it is that the survival center of our brains, which centers primarily, as you know, in the midbrain, that it moves very quickly. Nervous impulses move very quickly. And she actually tied that into myelination and other factors that are going on. But things move really fast there. And they need to, because survival would favor the quick, effective reaction, not the slow, deliberate. You know, you don't have time to think about it when there's a bear on your trail or whatever. And then she said that she has a wonderful way of talking about it, but that the front part of our brain, the forebrain or the frontal cortex, that it operates, it's kind of like still waters run deep. It operates very slowly in comparison to the midbrain, but it runs really deeply. And that's where we have a place for reflection and poetry and dancing. But that's slower by definition. I can really relate to that. You know, those kind of knee-jerk reactions when we're in red alert brain, they take over so fast. You only have like a nanosecond to sometimes shift before you get caught in the current. Whereas if we can grab a hold of the life raft of, at least at times, of the frontal cortex, it'll slow things down to where we can make more reasoned decisions that we can live with, probably feel a lot better about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I thought we could share one small example. This is new, a little bit new for me, and around, because we're talking about emotions, somewhat this week, and we're also now talking about wiggle room, and we're talking about those immediate reflexes, or the reactions that can emerge in a sort of a relationship, like a dialogue, an interaction with somebody, which I shared earlier today, how I've experimented some with literally it now. And this, if you've ever been in an interaction with somebody and you're triggered and you're pissed or whatever, you're scared, something comes up, you're on automatic. And it probably happens to everybody to some degree or another at some point. And so one of the hallmarks of that is that you can't think as clearly.
Yeah.
Or you may not say the thing that would be the most helpful. You might say something that would actually be injurious to either or both.
Yeah.
And so one of the things as I'm realizing how that often is in my body too. There's this energy, this intensity, this clenching or this wanting to kind of fight or flee kind of energy.
Yes.
And so why not allow the body, like, okay, so this is my experiment. I might try this some more. I've only done this a couple times, and I don't even know what part of me chose, but I literally turned away from the person. But first I said, I just need a moment, a timeout. And I just, blah, and I actually challenged myself, and I want to try this some more. Don't use words. You can use sounds, you can move, you can shake, you can express that, but just don't use words.
That's great.
Just see how that feels, so that you can actually calm that energy, calm the lizard or whoever's the fighting energy in the body, and then pause and take a couple breaths and see if the brain is now, the mind is more freed up for negotiating or collaborating.
That's just brilliant. I really respect you're doing that. I think you're modeling for all of us a way to move with this, to honor what we talked about, kind of the animal foundation of our being, give it its expression, and at the same time not violate the other, let's say, in an interaction. It's like a way of honoring both, it seems like to me. I think it's a brilliant suggestion. I like it a lot. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, I like in the spirit of talking about wiggle room, I like being able, I'm going to come back to what you started with, Angela. I like being able to create a space where we can literally wiggle,
Yeah.
And one of the things, and you and I've talked about this personally, is that I've placed a requirement. Speaking of requirements, I've placed a requirement on myself, following on my immediate environment placing that requirement on me growing up, which is that I wasn't allowed to, nor did I later allow myself to express that feeling. It would be shoved down, and then it manifests in some indirect way that's even more problematic. What would it be like just to let it be out and expressed, and then move on? How has that gone for you, doing that? May I ask? Yeah.
Well, like I said, I haven't done that a lot in a current. It's easier for me to practice this kind of thing by myself, or just even show you when I'm not triggered. And how has it gone for me? There's other tools or other models that have helped a lot. So, like, instead of saying to my friend who I'm upset with, something like, I hate you, or I hate that you did that, I might instead just simply say, I hate this. I feel a lot of intensity right now. Okay, so there, I'm disconnecting from making it into a conflict between us, and taking responsibility for, and I might still feel or think that they did something, that deserves my anger, but if I can just stop that automatic that
Yeah.
kind of takes over. And then that person might also see, that's the thing, is we often trigger each other.
Yeah.
So unless my friend who I'm mad at is
Yeah.
extremely calm and very grounded, there's
Mhm.
very likely he's going to feel injured or react back at me.
Mhm.
And I think that's very common,
Yeah, I
you
do
know.
too.
So
Yeah.
so I don't know if that answers your question. I mean, I'm pretty new at this in terms
Yeah.
of on my feet when it's happening.
Yeah.
My tendency is usually to shut down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, it's
Yeah.
sort of new for me to be more expressive, and
Yeah.
that's actually a whole different story, but,
Yeah.
you know, sort of letting the energy come up and say something.
Yeah.
But
I think it's wonderful. I
my
think it's
tendency is to just shut down
yeah. I think what
and
I want
drink,
to do
you know,
is
and go toward addiction.
yeah, yeah. I want to bookmark this because we're I feel like we're in a series of conversations right
Yeah,
now.
we are.
We need to wind down right now, but I'd like to. We're not nearly done. I'd like to come back to this and talk about this, applying it to anger, applying it to
Mm,
fear, applying it to dread, applying it to different feeling states. And then I really want to also underscore what you're saying is that we're not operating in a vacuum. We're in a relationship, and so when
yeah,
the other person is as activated as we are, it can be exponentially more difficult. I just really appreciate the suggestion. I think what it does is it offers some resources for all of us to consider that there may be some wiggle room in
mm,
terms of our emotional reactions. Wiggle room from, on the one side, shutting down, like you were talking about, and I was too, on the one hand, or wiggle room from just blasting away and really violating someone else in a state of anger and trying to find a middle path. I'd like to come back to this. I think it's
yeah,
brilliant. I love the work that you're doing, both in terms of your personal integration of all the training that you've had, but also how you apply it to day-to-day living. I've always liked that quote. I've quoted it here before. The jazz saxophonist Charlie Parker said, uh, uh, "If you don't live it, your horn won't play it." And
yeah.
I feel like that you're living this, Angela,
Mm,
and I aspire to as well. I'm really attempting to speak what I'm learning personally and bring that when it's hot off the press. So thank you. Thank you. Angela,
yeah,
I want to thank you for
yeah.
tonight. Thank you so much for the resource that you bring.
And you're welcome.
Really deeply appreciated. I hope you have a peaceful night, my dear. I do. Okay. And I
Thank
wish
you.
everybody who was here with us can take to heart what you've shared with us and
Mm,
apply it. And we'll be back, God willing, next Friday night. And
yeah,
we'll pick up
sounds good.
with these themes, I'm sure of it. Thank you again, Angela.
You're
Much love and
welcome.
many blessings to you. You take care and have a good evening.
You
Goodbye,
too.
everybody. Thanks for joining us. Okay. Bye-bye.